His fans adore him. Ezio Pinza, one of the greatest and most popular opera stars of the 20th century. For 2 decades, the Italian-born singer is the leading basso at the Metropolitan Opera. Then his talent and looks propel him to a second career beyond the opera stage. To millions, he becomes a romantic idol, a star of Broadway, television, and film.
For 12 years, I have waited for this moment.
Why have you waited so long?
All through the war, I was a prisoner of my palace.
Few watching this 1951 film would know the bitter irony behind Ezio's words to Lana Turner, that he had been a wartime prisoner in his own palace. In fact, during World War II, Ezio Pinza actually became a prisoner of the United States. He was locked not in a palace, but in a place that stands today as one of America's most hallowed national monuments. Once Japan attacks Pearl Harbor and the Axis powers declare war, the United States suddenly distrusts hundreds of thousands of German, Italian, and Japanese Americans who have been living as peaceful citizens. Ordinary legal residents one day, they are designated dangerous enemy aliens the next. For the sake of national security, President Roosevelt authorizes the FBI to crack down on these not yet naturalized Americans. The G-men enforce curfews, search their homes, confiscate their property, their businesses, just because of what they might do.
Ezio was humiliated by being called an enemy, but we realized it was wartime and, it didn't let it affect him that much.
But 2 FBI agents barge into Pinza's home on March 12, 1942. They are responding to a tip by a secret informer that Pinza is a fascist.
He looked up and they said, "Are you Ezio Pinza?" He said, "Yes, what can I do for you?" And they said, "In the name of the President of the United States, we place you under arrest."
The FBI agents search the house, but find nothing incriminating. Pinza is brought in for questioning. He is fingerprinted and photographed before being taken to Ellis Island, where hundreds of other so-called enemy aliens are being held.
At Ellis Island, he had his belt taken away from him, his shoelaces taken away from him, and he was put into a huge dormitory, open latrines, no telephone, no radio, and there he was.
Ironically, the Ellis Island Immigration Center has stood as a symbol of new beginnings, freedom, and opportunity since the 1880s. For millions escaping war, persecution, and poverty in their native lands, their first steps on American soil fall here on Ellis Island. Little did these hopeful immigrants know that at the outbreak of the Second World War, many, like Pinza, would be forced to return here as prisoners, their only crime, their nation of birth. The Pinzas and the Metropolitan Opera try to keep his career-threatening imprisonment from the press, but someone, perhaps an insider who will benefit from Pinza's absence, leaks the story.
The next morning, when the New York Times was delivered to my house, there was Ezio's picture, front page, center, with a big headline that he had been arrested.
The papers accuse Pinza of befriending Italian dictator Mussolini.
Ezio had never met Mussolini. I mean, he was not a friend of Mussolini. And in fact, in Italy, Ezio belonged to a group called the Freemasons, and they were the most anti-fascist group in Italy.
Confined to Ellis Island, Pinza is unable to perform as Mephistopheles in that week's Metropolitan Opera radio broadcast of Gounod's Faust. The opera is about a man who sells his soul to the devil.
So they called in another bass, it was Norman Corden.
Ezio's colleagues at the Met revealed to Doris that Corden, jealous of Pinza's star status and salary, has performed his own diabolical melodrama. In order to get the leading role and capture Pinza's stardom, Corden goes to the FBI and falsely denounces the Italian-born Ezio as a fascist.
he came in bragging. He said, "The king and the mighty have fallen. Now I'll have a chance to sing."
Doris rallies to free her husband, whose stature entitles him to a rare hearing for an enemy alien. But denied the right to an attorney and never informed of what the charges are, they lose the hearing. Yet Doris will not give up.
I was only 24. I decided that I wanted to talk to the Attorney General myself.
Doris camps out at U.S. Attorney General Francis Biddle's office for 4 days, but to no avail. Finally, the powerful New York City mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia, himself of Italian ancestry, intercedes on Pinza's behalf to secure a most unusual second hearing. This time, the Pinzas submit affidavits from influential friends about Ezio's character, convincing the 3 judges of his loyalty to America. After enduring 11 strenuous weeks of detention, Pinza is freed from Ellis Island, but secretly.
We were severely warned that we were not to tell anyone that Ezio had been released.
Despite the government's mysterious attempt to hush up his internment and discharge, the press runs the story. After Pinza's release, the Italian-born singer triumphantly resumes his opera career while performing his patriotic duty for the American war effort. A few months later, on Columbus Day of '42, Attorney General Biddle convinces President Roosevelt to withdraw enemy alien status from the Italians, who are innocent of any treason.
You Italians have met the test. Your loyalty to this country has been proved.
But what he didn't say was that those many hundreds who had already been detained were not released. They had to stay there till the end of the war.
After 1945, Ellis Island resumes its original purpose to process immigrants, but at just a fraction of its original capacity. By 1954, with immigrants arriving at airports throughout the United States, Ellis Island's deteriorating buildings are no longer needed. Its doors are closed. But Ellis Island reopens as a museum in 1990 to tell the history of American immigration. However, few Americans know how thousands of loyal Italian Americans suffered during the Second World War. So in 1999, 57 years after defending Ezio to the Attorney General, Doris Pinza returns to Washington, this time to testify before Congress about the fate of her husband.
The terror of being arrested and imprisoned without knowing the charges against him, the fear that he could be separated from his family for years and lose his career, and the difficult conditions on Ellis Island contributed, I am sure, to the high blood pressure and heart ailment that eventually took his life at the young age of 64.
Doris Pinza's testimony helps pass a new law to acknowledge the government's almost unknown trampling on the civil liberties of loyal Italian Americans during World War II. The bill helps unearth the role played by Ellis Island during those times when the gateway to the American dream became, for Ezio Pinza and many more, a portal to an American nightmare.